Account-based ticketing is where the data and intelligence traditionally stored in a legacy card or printed on paper is transferred to a cloud-based back office. The customer presents an identifier which is associated with the source of funds, and the back office determines the fare payment. Open-loop ticketing is a form of account-based ticketing, whereby the identifier and the source of funds are issued by a third party. For example, contactless EMV payment cards issued by banks.
Comparing where we were 20 years ago and where we are today, the number of smart card implementation used in private and public transport fare collection globally have far exceeded where we all first started. These smart cards allow passengers to load e-money or store value onto the card before travel and can only be used at specific gates, readers, or validators of its network of transport services. While in some countries, card issuers and operators were able to expand its use beyond transit to the non-transit market. However, this implementation has always been in favor to the issuer or operator that issue these cards, especially since it can only be spent within one specific network, resulting in a lack of interoperability across cities or within the city variants of transport means and the card ecosystem. These proprietary systems are categorized as closed loop. For example, the cards issued in Melbourne, Australia for the tram, buses and trains cannot be used in other cities within Australia, or the cards issued in Bangkok, Thailand for BTS trains cannot be used in MRT that is within the same city, and so on and so forth. So what is open loop ticketing? Well, some observers would say it is the direct opposite of closed loop ticketing. So what it means in general is that it is associated to accepting payment media that are outside of its transit network or outside of its specific closed loop card network. And how did this concept came about? With the technological advancement in wireless connectivity, smartphones, internet, digitalization or digital transformation, and other factors like reduced costs on the smart cards, increased number of solution providers in the payment verticals, offering both new turnkeys and innovative solutions, coupled with ingenious or economic costs of ownership or operating of such system, leasing, pay-per-use model, for example, has brought about vibrant activities in the financial banking or payment world. So much so it created significant opportunity to leverage on the payment innovation, the robust payment infrastructure, applying it in transit ticketing world. Example of such innovation is the use of the EMV smart cards, like the contactless debit, credit, prepaid cards, or the smartphone devices that has the enabled NFC mobile payment functions like Visa or MasterCard on it to pay for the fare at the gates or validators. With the proliferation of these EMVs contactless cards, capitalizing on the mature and secure banking payment technology and its platform that is globally interoperable, that seems to be the best option now to eliminate the interoperability issues that has revolved in the transit world for many years. Account-based ticketing. However, as most of the transit fare collection system were earlier designed as card-based to optimize its performance for transit in its closed-loop environment, such as offline transaction while on a moving bus or when there's no connectivity, or to meet the operational requirements set in the transit world of completing a transaction below 500 milliseconds. Therefore, a complex device level software is needed to compute fare policies to deduct amount from store value card or validating of fare products such as the monthly pass, multi multiple trips tickets or rebates, etc., which are done between the smart card and the onboard or in-station equipment. This presented a challenge for the EMV contactless cards that has its own set of rules for low-value transactions, the processing workflow, and the security policies, etc. In order to overcome these challenges, account-based system is introduced, which is to move all applicable fare logic or policies, including capping of fares or fare products from the front end to be applied in the back office, where the contactless cards are now simply treated as a credential or identifier at the front end devices. This also gives rise to even more possibility of accepting other form of fare media or complex fare structure or fare products like fare aggregation or integrating to the likes of mobility as a service, digital or mobile payment application, Apple Pay, Google Pay, Samsung Pay to be used in transit.
Account-based ticketing, aka ABT, and open-loop payments are the new buzzword in the fare collection world. ABT solves for complicated technology and operational processes that run on the ground devices at the stations or within the buses. Simplifies the processing by moving the entire computation into the back office. Open loop payments, on the other side, complements ABT by bringing in interoperability between multiple modes of transportation and deriving it from the existing ecosystem of contactless payment cards in the market. Open loop payments have the power of authorizing the transactions online and thereby has strong synergies with ABT, wherein the back office generates a payment request and sends it to the acquirer or the issuer through via the payment schemes like in any regular payments world. Hence brings in the power of contactless payments with ABT and simplifies the operating and maintenance life of the operator, which otherwise was very complicated. It also helps reduce the cost significantly by doing less on the ground and increasing the computing power more on the back office side, which can in fact means connecting different operators with different rules in a very simplified way.
These new frameworks help cut costs and grow top line for transport operators. This is because, number one, they reduce issuance and production of physical media, and therefore, number two, deliver infinite sales and distribution capacity. Number three, ultimately reducing friction and throughput as they check in and out of the service. And finally, number four, improving accessibility to transit by effectively allowing passengers to bring their own ticket.
As we know, most public transport fare collection system, for the PTOs, it is quite labor intensive as there is a huge infrastructure in place deploying, maintaining the different machines such as the general ticketing machine, GTMs, or ticket vending machines, VTMs, add value or top-up machines, manning the ticket office, access fare office, managing the top-up channels, and the logistical nightmares in card distribution, maintaining the card life cycle and inventories, especially those that have implemented tokens for single or return journey usage. They can easily relate to what I'm saying: collection of tokens, sorting out of the tokens, reusable or beyond reuse, and then redistributing this to the stations. And the cycle continues. The PTOs or the PTAs would also have to take care of the financial clearinghouse or the infrastructure for transaction settlement, and needless to say, to manage and maintain such a system. With the introduction of this new framework in the context of contactless EMV cards, this eliminates the need for such huge infrastructure that is used only by the PTOs, about the need of the GTMs, the TVMs, the TOM, the AVMs, etc. The operational and logistical nightmares and the costs associated. PTOs can easily rely and leverage on the existing infrastructure that exists with the banks and the payment platform that international payment schemes have built upon globally to manage their funds on the cards in which passengers have been exposed to and used to and conveniently use these cards in transit. One example can be seen from the Transport for London. One of the earlier adopters of open loop ticketing reported the cost of fare collection reduced from 14% to 9%, with the expectation to reduce further to 6%. Imagine a city that has lots of tourists visiting all year round, and the best mode of transport to get around the city is by the metros or subway. Open loop ticketing provides overseas passengers the convenience to just flash his or her contactless EMV cards at the gate rather than queuing up, fumbling for coins, and navigating through the menu in the ticketing machines just to buy the single or return journey tickets. What it means is that transport operators can now focus on their core business of moving people, providing timely and improved service, improving passenger experience that can help to increase ridership while reducing operational costs. This framework allows flexibility to implement new and integrated services, and easy to implement new or change fare structure or policies or include fare products.
An empirical study from Transport from London has proven that the cost of running an ABT and open loop payments system is half of what its traditional system used to cost. This comes in from the benefit of having contactless fare media available in the market and the advantage of not issuing cards or managing the top-up infrastructure on the ground. This is a significant saving to the operators. It also brings in additional revenue because it simplifies multimodal transportation and fare policies and rules that the government can form around ABT, because it's all back office processing, requires less of headache and nuances of bringing in interoperability, all multiple mode of transportation on the ground level devices. Brings in convenience, which makes the commuters adopt for public transportation and generate more revenues for the operators thereby.
When we look at some of the environments like metro stations at peak hour, guaranteeing high throughput is really important, and therefore transaction speed is key. A range of innovations have allowed transaction speeds to fall well under 1 second. Of course, there's the higher speed of network connections, but we've also seen development of special transit frameworks for processing contactless bank card payments in a transit context, as well as the development of transit-optimized barcodes, which allow for cracked or misaligned mobile screens, for example, and all of this coupled with the ability to provide business continuity while offline.
The transaction speed of below 500 milliseconds to 300 milliseconds has been the norm in the transit payment, as it is the optimized speed to process and handle passenger tapping their contactless smart cards at the gates or point of entry from the unpaid area to the paid area and vice versa to get to the metro or subway, especially during the peak hours or the rush hours. These facilitate clearing or easing of the large crowds faster and providing a smoother user experience. However, in a typical EMV contactless card transaction, it would easily take more than a second in an online environment. So in order to meet this demanding standard in transit, the international scheme in the likes of Visa and MasterCard introduced offline data authentication or ODA and deferred authorization as a method to overcome this, where the price of each trip is only submitted for full authorization and settlement after being computed and received later. So as we continue to progress in this era of digital transformation, coupled with the fact of technology continue to advance, especially in ICT, in the likes of 5G network, for example, computing power over the cloud, and that coronavirus disease pandemic helped speed up the acceptance of contactless payment to reduce the risk of transmission. And the vibrant activities in the payment world, these are the things that are changing and reshaping our way of life, and we are bound to see limitless new innovation and option in the near future, some of which evolve from the traditional season pass to subscription package in the form of mobility as a service, and others to look out for includes on-demand services, card-on-file payment that are typically in the e-commerce.
Public transport operators demand very high passenger throughput per minute, which means the transactions need to be processed at lightning speed. The benchmark is anywhere between 500 to 700 milliseconds for the transactions to be processed. Offline payments typically would mean that the transaction is processed just between the fare media and the readers. No server, no back office processing required for the same. With the modern trends coming in with the connectivity and infrastructure associated, there can be a revolution where online transactions could be processed with the same speed, and it would eliminate the need and risk of offline payments altogether.
Widespread adoption of contactless EMV is happening right now. It started with large beacon cities like London, Singapore, Chicago, and so forth, and is now expanding into the Tier 2 space. Contactless and QR technologies combined can give us a decent coverage of the citywide rider demographic. Where perhaps the QR is better suited for embedding into a mobile journey planning experience or printed on thermal receipt paper, maybe where cash is still a key means of payment, and CMV capturing a lot of the rest of the demographic. Worth saying also that perhaps we've seen some regional variations with barcode, a lot more common means of payment in Asia versus contactless bank cards in, say, Europe.
These or projects undergoing trials, pilot in the stage of evaluation, completed RFP in the phase of upgrading or calling for tenders. Well, just like the theory of diffusion of innovation, there would be innovators, early adopters, early majority, and so on and so forth. Between now and the next 5 years, we will see much more of this or of such implementation. As mentioned, with account-based ticketing, ABT, it gave rise to other innovative payment options. In China, we can see that the PTOs are widely adopting the unconventional fare media of accepting mobile payment in the form of QR with WeChat Pay, Alipay, for example, and facial recognition for both metro and buses. And there have been reports that such implementation are also attaining rather fast speed of transaction accepted by the PTOs. Besides those that I have mentioned earlier, like on-demand services, cloud-based solutions, mobility as a service, card-on-file payments, there are also ongoing trials based on Bluetooth, facial recognition, UHF, and mobile device ID for hands-free ticketing technology. While some of these may be subjected to personal data protection or privacy law, What we can do is only to see the need to change the regulatory or the laws over time. Maybe I would say that in the next 5 years, you will still see a large number of contactless smart cards for closed loop EMV still being used. NFC smartphones, mobile ticketing payment, and or QR. You might ask why contactless cards. Yes, closed loop physical cards might be declining, but it may be seen as a rebirth as some of these cards goes on mobile. In some developed and emerging countries who have predominantly been using closed loop cards system for the longest time, it would be impossible to shut down this system overnight. Many will be adopting a hybrid model of having both new and old coexisting for some time. Some transit operators are also tapping on the sale of novelty licensed characters product on contactless key fob, contactless cards as a form of revenue. The innovation of having, for example, Flickr cards on mobile like iPhones and Google Pixel phones that's available in Japan, Suica, Hong Kong, Octopus. Announced in March 2019, Melbourne, Australia, Mikey Cards, which is adopting the NXP MyFair to Go service, will be available on Android NFC enabled phones. So it would be that for those that doesn't have any legacy system to begin with, they would be able to leapfrog to adopt the newest fare collection system that suits them. However, to create an all-inclusive society, PTOs would have to consider the aging and the less tech-savvy individuals.
I firmly believe that innovations and technologies coexist to cater to different business needs across various geographies. For example, facial recognition could be a very big thing for markets with strong enforcement and if the technology is able to give accurate results to the operators. QR could be the next big thing, replacing the traditional cards ticketing across emerging markets and developed markets where consumers are used to smartphones and applications. Whereas voice-based ticketing and payments could be one of the game changer technologies for markets which are underdeveloped and with strong penetrations of feature phones.
The money in transit fare payments is in creating repeatability and economies of scale. Repeatable deployments mean faster deployments, lower cost of sales for operators.
First, we need to know the background behind mobility. Urban mobility forms an integral part of our everyday life, as it is the key function to create a livable and sustainable city, where this infrastructure brings about economic benefits and growth of a country. And these cities will bring about urbanization with increased population, equate increased daily ridership in the public transport. The role and the job of PTOs and the PTAs are to look after and improve the public transport infrastructure. And so the money goes to the stakeholders involved in providing the solutions. Although the transit average ticket size is small, but the frequency of use is high. Bank has always tried to co-brand their bank cards with transit in the early days, so that their cards can stay to be on the top of the wallet for their customers. With the convergence of transit and EMV payment in the lights of open loop ticketing and account-based ticketing, banks are continuing to be in the league and sought to keep their cards at the top of the wallet. And also the killer app that commuters would want to use it every day. And as the rise in the usage would also drive its revenue, a guaranteed daily revenue. The other contender would definitely be the solution providers, whereas in the case the automatic fare collection providers, the sheer size of transaction volume every day, especially in the mega cities, make it even so vital that fare collection has to be in place to prevent any loss of income.
Considering that transit is a necessity for every citizen, government's focus should be to provide a greener, safer, and decluttered commute to the citizens. Government's core objective should only be to see how many passengers or commuters do they transport every day. With this objective, revenue is on the sidelines as far as the authorities and government are concerned. At the same time, private players should be incentivized and motivated to bring in convenience to the life of a commuter, which means you will have different stakeholders like financial institutions bringing in contactless payments, B2C apps and mobile consumer players bringing in QR into the apps for convenience to smartphone users, and players like telecom operators who can enable ticketing and payments over feature phones.